Producer Joe here from the Working Fans Podcast. And at the Working Fans Podcast, this is just a podcast that three lifelong fans created to have a place to talk comedy and pro wrestling. Now, our comedy podcast releases every Tuesday, while our wrestling podcast releases every Thursday. We release bonus episodes under the moniker Working Fans Presents every now and then. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Breaker, any major podcast provider. The important thing is just please like, rate, review, subscribe wherever you listen to us. Now, we have started a new thing. We are now on Amazon and Audible. So those episodes release every Monday. And that's kind of going through the archives and just releasing our old episodes into new areas. So if you want to live through the process with us again, take that journey with us again, you can find us over on Amazon and Audible. Now, if you can't get enough of us in the audio form, check out our YouTube. It's youtube.com/C/Working Fans Wrestling Pod, or just search Working Fans Podcast on YouTube. We have the whole archive is up there. And if you listen to the Working Fans Podcast, you are more than familiar with the 531. That is our signature segment where we take your top 5 list on a particular subject, vote it down to a top 3, and then debate it down to a top 1. Now, guys, if you want to hear 3 guys talk shit about comedy, wrestling, life, anything, you will enjoy the Working Fans Podcast.
All right, everybody, it's the Working Fans Combatcast edition. Dave and Chevy back at it again, and we're got a couple things we'll talk about. I think before we do our 5-3-1 today, which will be greatest MMA upsets, let's look at this weekend's pay-per-view card, UFC 265. I'll just point out a prelim fight here. Chevy, you're going to have to help me with the enunciation of one of these guys, not Bobby Green, who I'm very familiar with.
Rafael Fiziev?
Fiziev, yeah.
That's a guess.
Who's got a kickboxing record, too, by the way. He's got like 39 wins, 8 losses, 29 by knockout, and his MMA record is like 9-1.
9-1, yeah.
Yeah, so a lot of experience.
I saw a highlight recently of him knocking someone out. I don't know who it was, but it was it was a fairly recent fight.
Yeah. God, what's the guy's name? Makano? Hanato Makano there.
Hanato, yeah.
Yeah, Hanato Makano. Yeah, Makano's got some big wins on his career.
Yeah, he's a good fighter,
yeah, he just knocked him out. Yeah, he's on a 3-fight win streak. Beat Mark Cassis. Alex White.
DeCasey.
Yeah, that guy.
He's a stand-up fighter too, so I think Fiziev's mostly a stand-up fighter. So I mean, Bobby Green, he'll do some wrestling, but he's also mostly a stand-up fighter. Big step up in competition, though.
Yeah, I'm looking at Bobby Green right now. Bobby's won a bunch of his last fights. I think he lost his last one, but he'd won before that. Together, they have about like 6 performance bonuses, I want to say, between them. So
that's why they're that main fight on the prelims. Got to get everyone to buy the pay-per-view.
Well, fireworks. So Song Ladong and Casey Kenny kicking it off.
It's a good fight.
I like Song Ladong. He's a guy that always brings it too. I think
Team Alpha Male guy.
Yeah, I like him. I think he might get it done. Casey Kenny's coming off that split decision loss to Dominic Cruz too, where he was competitive in. So that's man. I don't know. Maybe Casey gets it done. What do you think?
I'm gonna go with Song. He's
Yeah.
got the power for sure. Dom's not knocking a lot of dudes out, so
True.
he's also
And
on the
then-
downslope of his career. As much as I hate to say it, but
Right.
might have just caught him at the right time.
Well, we'll find out. We'll see what Casey brings to the table in this fight.
Mm-hmm.
Now, after that, we got Tisha Torres and Angela Hill. Angela Hill loves to stay busy. Tisha Torres, to me, is always one of those tough fights, too, stylistically. I don't see her get finished too often, so I think this will go the distance. Hill's one that keeps improving constantly to me, though. I'm going to pick Angela Hill here, but just barely.
I'm going to pick Tisha Torres because Angela Hill always gets screwed by the judges, but her fights always go to decision. So I'm going to go with Tisha because Hill's going to get screwed by the judges.
All right, there we go. Judges screw over Tisha Torres. All right, so we got Michael Chiesa and Vicente Luque. Vicente Luque, I think he's got the bigger, heavier hands in this fight. I think he loves to bring it, but Chiesa has been such a monster. And he's been so good at wrestling people down to the ground at welterweight. And that might be a problem with some people. I don't think he's going to have that problem here. I think that's what he's going to do. I think Luque can catch him if he's not careful. But I think Chiesa will wrestle him, hold him down, maybe beat him up a little bit. And he could get the submission finish, but I think he'll go to decision.
I agree. I think it's going to go just like you said. Could get a submission, but it'll probably be he'll grind him out. He's just good at nullifying his opponent's offense. He looks great at welterweight. Luque is a good benchmark for where his skill set will be at in this division, though. So he gets this win, he could be, fighting a top 5 guy next.
I agree, and I hope he gets it. I'm a big Chiesa fan.
Same.
Jose Aldo versus Pedro Munoz. To me, Pedro Munoz is always the guy who got in that dogfight with Cody Garbrandt and knocked him out. He's skilled. He's one of the best in this division, but I don't know if he's as good as Aldo. I feel like Aldo is still good enough that in this division, he's going to be that top 5 guy. He's just not going to beat the top 2 or top 3. And I think that's where it is. I think Aldo gets this done, but I'm kind of rooting for Munoz. I'd kind of like to see some new blood go a little further up the ladder here, and I'd like to see Pedro Munoz get it done, preferably a dogfight. I'm sure neither of their corners are hoping for that, but I think this one could be fireworks, and I think Munoz might be able to get it done. My heart's leaning towards him, but my mind says Aldo still has enough in the tank to get this done.
I think this is going to be fight of the night. That's probably why it's the co-main. That being said, I think Pedro gets a TKO finish, probably 3rd round.
Okay. I'm pulling for you there. I was thinking Aldo decision, but I'm hoping you're right. And main event, Derek Lewis, the Black Beast, Cyril Gane. Cyril Gane, like most of Derek Lewis's top opponents, to me, looks like the better all-around fighter. That being said, Derek finds a way to win these usually. And the things that would be a problem for Derek, wrestling, stuff like that, I don't think are going to be a problem here. I think Gane's going to want to keep it standing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Derek will find his opening. So on paper, this looks like Gane should win it. But if you've ever watched Derek Lewis fights, I think this is the perfect style opponent that Derek will find a way. I think he'll lose a lot of rounds, and then he's going to knock him out in the 3rd or 4th. So
I think this is going to be a super boring fight unless you love the anticipation of Gane possibly, getting caught.
Right.
It's going to be a lot of Gane footwork and Derek Lewis slowly shuffling towards him. Just like you said, he's just going to be looking for that one big right hand.
Right.
I agree that Gane will probably try to keep it standing. Obviously, Derek Lewis is not shooting for a takedown. Yep. The only variable I can think of is Derek gets too excited because it's in his hometown in Houston. I think he really wants this win and get a shot back at Francis.
Sure.
So obviously we're all pulling for the Black Beast. He's the best. So.
Yeah, I think the UFC is in a pretty win-win situation here. I mean, Gane would be an undefeated heavyweight if he wins, but Derek Lewis, who technically has that victory over over Nagano last time, even though it was a boring ass fight, and he's such a favorite by everybody. If he can beat Gane, especially finish him with a KO, and having the interim belt, which doesn't really make a difference, but just the look of it and everything, I guess, champion versus champion, just to market it. I don't know. I think UFC's in a pretty good position with this fight. It's interesting. I did hear that Dana was saying that John Jones can fight. So whoever wins this fight will fight Francis, and whoever wins that fight can fight John Jones, unless Jones wants to fight Stipe Miocic. Right now, Stipe's already agreed to fight, according to Dana. What do you think about that fight, too? Stipe and John Jones. I think that would be a very interesting fight at heavyweight.
Before I do that, I just want to call the Gane and Lewis fight is gonna. I'm going with Derek Lewis head kick knockout in the second round.
Second round head kick. I like that.
I'm just willing it into existence. I just want that to happen so bad because that would be hilarious. Back to Stipe and John Jones. That is, until we see John Jones at heavyweight, it's really hard to call. He got hit a lot at light heavyweight, especially his last few fights. Can he take those? I mean, he's never been knocked out, obviously, so he's been hit hard by some guys in light heavyweight, but he didn't fight Rumble. No one's hit him like he's gonna get hit by Stipe or Francis or something, So I think that might be the best matchup, or the worst matchup for John Jones would be Stipe, because he's good everywhere. And I think Stipe matches up well with him wrestling and striking. Stipe's been there. He knows he can take any shots that John Jones dishes out. The only thing is John Jones has great range management, and he'll throw kicks and be a little bit more versatile than most heavyweights. But see if John looks, we're not big John Jones fans, so I'm hoping he looks slower and he still takes all those shots and he just gets knocked out. But if he doesn't look any slower, he can still wrestle, he can still move, he's going to dominate heavyweight.
We don't know if he's not going to have knockout power that way, too.
Right.
And I'll argue, too, I agree with what you're saying, but you could almost wonder if Stipe is a better matchup for him, because even though Stipe is more well-rounded, he doesn't have that lights-out power. I mean, he has power, like all heavyweights do, but he doesn't have that lights-out power of a Nagano or a Lewis.
Right.
Or that's the X factor, right? So, I mean, in some ways, it could be a good fight for John. In some ways, if John is sluggish, well, then it's the most skilled heavyweight all around. So that's which is a giant X factor. I hope we see that fight. I hope they make that, because I'd love to see Stipe get a big fight if he's not going to get the title fight next. And
very interesting fight. Very interesting.
All right, let's talk. We're going to go right into it now. Greatest MMA upsets of all time. I'm going to read some lists for you and get your opinions on them. Then I'll ask you for yours, and I'll give you mine. All right. So I got my man Dan Backley of Cage My IQ. He sent me a list. He's got, and I feel like some of these are going to be repeated. Matt Serra versus GSP. The first fight, obviously. Holly Holm defeating Ronda Rousey. Daniel Cormier wins the Strikeforce Heavyweight Grand Prix as an alternate, which nobody knew how Cormier was going to be at that time. Chris Weidman beats Anderson Silva, and that would be again
first
fight. Yep. And then this is a good one too. Fabricio Werdum beats Fedor. What do you think? I'll get your opinion on the Cormier one first, because I feel like we're not going to see that one again.
I didn't think about that one. Super interesting. That's a very good point. It may belong on the list, and I think you're right. You probably won't see it on a lot of them.
No,
I didn't think about that until you had just said it. So
yeah, I mean, to win the whole tournament as an alternate is pretty impressive. I mean, he beat Josh Barnett in the finals, and before that, I know he had beaten like Bigfoot Silva, who Bigfoot Silva had a lot of steam at that time. Bigfoot Silva, I think, also had a win over Fedor coming into that. And I know Cormier himself said that was a scary time. Like, he's new in MMA and you're fighting Bigfoot with those heavy hands. I got my man Cran here. He's got a list, and he always brings us something interesting, so I'm sure he'll have one that's a little
for
different.
sure.
Most of these seem to make sense, though. Rockhold Bisping, 2. Obviously, one Bisping, 1. Yep. Rousey Home. Dillashaw Barao, 1. Bigfoot Overeem, the aforementioned Bigfoot. And here's one where I don't necessarily know if it was a giant upset, but it's interesting to me. This goes Andros versus Pettis. Yeah,
I mean, Pettis was on Wheaties boxes.
Right.
Yeah, he was the face of the UFC, great looking champion. So, I mean, that's a good shot. That's a good list from Cran. Shout out to Cran.
Shout out to Cran, my man Cran. I think what was interesting about that is maybe Pettis was a big star at the time, but yeah, I don't know. Dos Anjos was so good. What about Bigfoot Overeem too? That's one I think that was an interesting one to have out there.
Scary Overeem.
Yeah, we were talking about Overeem hadn't lost. He just came off that victory over Brock. He was a Strikeforce champion, all the titles, and everybody thought Bigfoot was just going to be on his way. He was on his way to get a world title shot at the time. And then, boom, Bigfoot. He was juiced up probably at the time as well. And he was like, nah, son, I got these hands.
Yeah, that was when that was Ubereem, and he had no neck.
Yeah. I got another list here from Randy Osga. He's got Chris Weidman versus Anderson Silva, UFC 162. Rousey versus Holm, 193. Shout out to Randy for giving me the UFC events in this. Matt Serra versus George St. Pierre, UFC 69. Bisping Rockhold, UFC 199. And then here's one that's a little different. I'm glad everybody brought something a little different here. Randy Couture, Tim Sylvia, UFC 68. I believe this is where Randy Couture won the heavyweight title, which kind of cemented his legacy a little bit too, being a multiple class world champion in different weight classes. I'll just ask you about Weidman Silva, because I know we've had it on the list, but just some comments on that, because you were starting to get into MMA around this time.
That one also made it on my list too. Anderson Silva was the best mixed martial artist of all time at that time, and he was embarrassing his opponents. And Weidman, with the help of Ray Longo and Matt Serra, was undefeated at the time. I think he was like 9-0 or something like that. Yeah. So he came in confident, couldn't touch Anderson, and then Anderson got a little bit cocky, but Weidman clipped him and then showed it wasn't a fluke in the second one.
Shout out to Longo, too, who orchestrated the 2 biggest upsets of all time on these lists, too.
That's right.
Yeah. So
underrated coach.
Yeah. Punch a hole in his fucking chest.
Yeah.
Our man Carney Osada sent us the list here.
Still hiding out somewhere.
Still hiding under the ring somewhere. Sarah versus GSP. That was his first one, actually. Because in his words, too, nobody knew who the hell Matt Serra was at this time. And he said, barely people know who he is now. That's the greatest upset of all time. His words, not mine. Bisping versus Rockhold. He also told me, too, one of the things about this, too, is he never thought he'd be rooting for Bisping around that time, but he ended up loving Bisping. And he said Bisping was a cocky, arrogant fighter, but somehow Rockhold was more cocky and arrogant. Yep. And he obviously took him lightly, and Rockhold's chin never recovered. And I got to agree with a lot of what he's saying there, because, I mean, Rockhold just had his hands down, and I remember just found myself kind of rooting for Bisping that weekend, just because, it's a Cinderella story. He had been in the UFC for so long, but I thought it would never happen. But boom, he caught him. Another one he had on his list, Thug Rose versus Joanna Jacek. I thought that was a great one to have on there. He was live for that too, by the way. So good on him. That was one. The way it happened too, I think we all thought that Rose might be able to catch her later, or maybe
flying armbar or something.
Yeah, slick submission, because she has. But with strikes and getting her tap to strikes in the first round and just going there and totally
Amazing.
No.
Oh, amazing. I don't know if I've ever been so hyped for a win.
Yeah, that was awesome.
That's great.
He's also got Gabriel Gonzaga versus Mirko Krokop on here, which was a huge upset because Gonzaga really never did anything on the level of Krokop or do anything of that afterwards. But he ended up not only he gets the big win, but the way he does it, he basically Krokop's Krokop with a giant head kick that just folds him. It looks like he's lawn furniture. It's awful.
It was a brutal knockout, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely brutal. And I can see why that made his list. And then one that I think almost makes everybody's list, Holly Holm versus Ronda Rousey. And he said what was particularly shocking about this was if you look at a lot of his other picks, a lot of them might be flash knockouts. He said, but with Holly Holm, she went out, executed a game plan, and kind of embarrassed Ronda, basically stopping the takedown and then, beating her up in the clinch and then boom, head kick. So she really kind of outclassed Ronda, and nobody really saw this coming. Like, people might have speculated, but it was just hugely shocking for this to happen.
At the time, people were talking about Ronda Rousey beating up men in that weight class. So, no, I don't think anyone saw that coming. No. I didn't see that coming.
Hell no, absolutely not. And actually, before we go to this, I'll read you mine. I got Bigfoot versus Overeem. I actually jumped on the bandwagon with that one. Weidman versus Silva 1. Again, Silva, one of the greatest fighters of all time. It's outstanding. Sarah GSP, you have to have on there. Dillashaw Barao. A few people had this on the list. To me, you got to also point out the fact, too, that Barao, I think, had one loss in his career. It was like his first loss, and then he won like 20-something in a row. Unbelievable at the time. He's killing everybody. And Dillashaw is like the Cinderella story, like, it'd be a big upset. He completely outclasses Barao. Forget about what we were just talking about with Holm versus Rousey. Dillashaw embarrasses Barao. Dismantles him, takes his soul away from him, and Barao is never the same after that fight.
Absolutely. Changed him. Yeah. Changed the trajectory of his career after that.
Yeah, it was, and then he brutally kicks him in the head. And, and Holm and Rousey are the final one on my list. But hats off to the Dillashaw, who got the win over Corey Sandhagen a few weeks ago. I know we talked a little bit about that. Just a quick sidebar on that. I just so impressed. I think people would just think that, Dillashaw is this EPO and all this. I think he showed that, although it was a tough competitive fight, I think that's more on Sandhagen just being that good. It really showed that Dillashaw is near that top level still, and maybe still good enough to win the title. We'll see. So, now, who do you got for a list?
All right, so I have, which I was glad to hear on a lot of lists, is Bisping Rockhold 2. Yep. That was where I first started to become a fan of Bisping. I didn't like how cocky Rockhold was, but Bisping is, uglier, so I like him more. I also had Dillashaw and Barao on there for the same reasons you did. He dismantled Barao and then did it again in the second fight. That's where I became a fan of TJ as well. Like I said in our previous episode, his mixing the striking into wrestling with his footwork is amazing. Anderson Silva, Weidman 1. Same reason that we said before. It's just such a shock. Yeah. Then I had Holly Holm Rousey because, like I said before, there was talks about her beating up Floyd Mayweather or men in their division or whatever. And then most shocking upset of all time for me is Matt Serra GSP, because GSP, similar to Silva, top of MMA at the time. Nobody knew who Matt Serra was.
Yeah, I think you got to kind of put both the Longo upsets in there. I think Serra, GSP, and Silva Weidman have to make two of our top 3, and I think the third one, as much as I love that TJ one, I think you got to put Holm over Rousey because, like you said, people thought Ronda was going to beat up guys. They thought she was going to go beat up Floyd Mayweather in a boxing match. There were talk of that. It's which is so crazy looking back at it now. But it's like, what were we thinking? But you buy into the hype and. She was good. I'm not, taking anything away from her, but there was also a certain amount of hype that goes with that, and Holm definitely derailed it. It's tough to want to almost eliminate one from this because they're all shocking for different reasons.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
Yeah, I'm gonna say I'm gonna eliminate Weidman Silva first, just because I think even though Weidman was a shocking upset, I think out of the three upsets, Weidman posed the most threat, at least on paper. He was a wrestling-based fighter who had some decent stand-up and decent jiu-jitsu.
And he clipped him with a shot in the first one, and then Silva broke his leg in the second one. He didn't get beat up, for 5 rounds. So I think that's a good call.
Yeah, and then Sarah GSP. Sarah comes out as, I think that's the big thing people forget about this too. He was a fighter on like a Redemption, The Ultimate Fighter.
Right, he had been cut before, right?
Right. So he comes back cut, and it's like the Rocky story, but it's supposed to just be like for a show. It's supposed to be like almost a gimmick here, right? Like he's just here, and he's not going to really beat GSP. This is to like have something we can promote. He gets it done though. And then you got Ronda Rousey, who was the biggest hype train and breaking all pay-per-view records, gets beat by Holly Holm. I think MMA purists probably like Sarah GSP. You may disagree. I'm going to go fucking Ronda and Holly. I think Ronda and Holly was the upset, because I just think that there was this GSP at least had maybe lost a fight or two at that time. Rarely ever happened, but fucking Ronda was tapping everybody out in the first round practically.
I agree because it's MMA, so 4-ounce gloves. Anyone can get clipped and lose a fight, and then that's basically what happened in GSP. There was no way that she couldn't get anything off to beat Holman on that night. So shocking. I remember we went to Wild Wings to watch that, I believe, and it was very loud in there when that happened. Very exciting.
Yeah, that whole fucking, again, it's just a crazy time. I think that what was interesting too is that Holly Holm also wrote off a lot of success off of that too. I mean, Holly did not follow that up like with beating up everybody. She ended up losing to Misha Tate, unfortunately for her, and she's had some wins.
In the 5th round, she was arguably winning that fight. So
I mean, she's had a fine. I'm not taking it away, but my point is, like, despite having some wins and losses, she still rides a relative high off of that win. She's still more likely to get a main event because she's the girl that beat up Ronda Rousey.
True.
So I think that for that reason, it means a little more. Agree, disagree. I know we did get some feedback on one episode. People thought we were riding Cormier's nuts a little too hard, but they did agree with our getting rid of Fedor. They did back us up on that.
Good. I
thought we would get some shit for that, but we didn't. So let's see what you guys think this time. We'd love to hear back. Do you think we got it right? Tell us what you think about UFC 265. We'll find out if we got that right. I got Hall wrong last week. Boy, did I get Lariah Hall wrong. That was so sad.
Yeah, that was tough to watch.
Yeah, Strickland. Now Strickland might fight the aforementioned Luke Rockhold next too. That's
tough fight.
Tough fight for Rockhold.
Depends what Luke Rockhold you're gonna get though. Also, so
yeah, I mean, I'd like to see the Luke Rockhold of old. Honestly, I mean, at this point, I don't begrudge this guy. I feel bad for this guy at this point. He's been knocked out so brutally all the time. I don't want to see him come back just to get.
I don't feel bad for him. He's too pretty.
Let's see him get murdered. All right. On that note, this is the Combatcast. We're out.